It's my journey, it's your journey. You need my help and I need yours. 'Cause we are.
Miracles of St. John Vianney, patron of parish priests. Step into any Catholic parish and you're likely to spot his image, gentle, ascetic, radiating quiet holiness, St. John Vianney, the humble curé of Ars. For generations, his story has been a guiding light for priests and lay faithful alike, a living catechism whispering what fidelity to Christ looks like in flesh and blood, in times of doubt, spiritual dryness, or longing for deeper communion. The Church turns her gaze to this simple parish priest whose love for God and souls blazed like a beacon through 19th century France. Here at Journeys of Faith, we continually find hearts drawn to the story of St. John Vianney, not only for his miraculous deeds, but for his profound trust in God's grace and unwavering service to God's people. With every whispered confession, late-night prayer, and act of sacrifice, the curé invites us to rediscover the extraordinary within the ordinary. His life is a testament to the real, often quiet, ways that holiness flourishes in parish life, offering hope and encouragement for every Catholic striving to live out their faith amidst daily challenges. As we explore the life and miracles of St. John Vianney, the beloved patron of parish priests, let us walk together with open minds and hearts, eager to glean wisdom from his steadfast journey. Whether you're a parish priest seeking inspiration, a catechist teaching the next generation, or a family searching for authentic models of holiness, St. John's witness reminds us that sanctity is possible, right here in the rhythm of our own lives. Let his story, treasured by the Church and lovingly recounted by Journeys of Faith, inspire us to trust more deeply, pray more fervently, and serve more generously, one day at a time. Early life of St. John Vianney. Nestled in the quiet village of Dardilly, France, the humble beginnings of St. John Vianney speak powerfully to anyone who has ever felt unqualified for God's work. Born on May 8, 1786, into a devout farming family, young Jean-Baptiste Marie Vianney was raised amidst the turbulence of the French Revolution. His earliest memories were shaped by clandestine masses held in barns, where faithful priests risked their lives for the Eucharist, a witness that sowed seeds of deep, unwavering reverence in the boy's soul. Even as a child, John's heart was drawn to prayer and acts of penance, setting him apart from his peers. Despite battling learning difficulties, especially with Latin, his resolve never wavered. The trials that might have discouraged others only inflamed his longing for the priesthood. John's family, recognizing the extraordinary faith flickering within him, supported his dreams tirelessly. His mother, a woman of strong Catholic convictions, nurtured in him a love for our Blessed Mother and the saints, weaving rosary prayers and stories of holy men and women into the rhythm of their simple days. The young Vianney's journey to the altar was not without hardship. Fears of arrest during the Revolution, meager means to afford schooling, and repeated setbacks in his seminary studies marked his path. Yet, like a candle burning undimmed in the darkness, his fidelity grew only stronger. God, who delights in working through what is simple and small in the eyes of the world, was preparing this quiet country boy for a priestly mission that would transform not just the village of Ars, but countless souls across generations. St. John Vianney's early years remind us. God writes his most beautiful stories with humble instruments. Through perseverance, prayer, and trust, even the obstacles in our lives can become the very means by which he brings forth miracles. Deepen your journey with St. John Vianney. Discover, pray, and grow in faith. Are you inspired by the unwavering devotion and heroic sacrifice of St. John Vianney? At Journeys of Faith, our mission is to help you bring the example of the saints, like the holy curé of Ars, into the rhythm of your daily life. We invite you to experience a deeper relationship with Christ by embracing the faith-filled legacy of St. John Vianney and countless holy men and women through resources crafted for families, parishes, and every Catholic soul on the journey. Here's how Journeys of Faith can walk with you. Explore the lives of the saints. Dive into inspiring books, documentaries, and real-life accounts, including our legacy specials on St. John Vianney, rooted in the tradition and teaching of the Church. Enrich your prayer life. Find beautiful, traditional devotional items and sacramentals, statues, medals, prayer cards, and more to help you invoke the intercession and example of St. John Vianney in your own parish and home. Trustworthy Catholic resources. From Eucharistic miracle stories to Marianne apparitions, browse our hand-picked catalog for faith-deepening materials you and your loved ones can trust. Connect with a faithful community. Receive ongoing encouragement, catechesis, and prayer support from a team dedicated to living the mission of Jesus Christ and His Church. Let St. John Vianney's witness inspire you. Visit Journeys of Faith and begin your next step on the path of holiness today. Shop Journeys of Faith for St. John Vianney, a struggling student called to the priesthood. The story of St. John Vianney begins not with instant brilliance or ease, but with honest struggle and perseverance, a reminder that sanctity is not reserved for the talented or naturally gifted, but for all who are willing to respond to God's call. Born in 1786 in Dardilly, a small village near Lyon, the young Jean-Baptiste Marie Vianney grew up during the storms of the French Revolution, a time when priests went into hiding and the Mass was celebrated in secret. Surrounded by this atmosphere of hardship, John learned early on the value of sacrifice, courage, and a steadfast trust in God's providence. From his earliest days, John Vianney harbored a desire to become a priest, a vocation that seemed entirely out of reach. Academics did not come easily to him. Latin, the language of priestly studies, was a particular cross. His grasp of it was so shaky that he was dismissed more than once as unsuitable for the seminary. But John's humble spirit, deep devotion to the Blessed Sacrament, and unshakable prayer life set him apart. With the patient help of faithful mentors, especially Abbé Bally, a compassionate parish priest, he persisted through humiliation, setbacks, and even outright failure. What might discourage most merely deepened John's resolve. His struggles brought him to ever deeper dependence on God. Time and again, he entrusted his weaknesses to Jesus and Mary, seeing them not as obstacles, but as vehicles for grace and spiritual growth. He would later say, "Our greatest cross is to fear the cross." Through his experience, St. John Vianney became a witness for all who struggle with doubt, learning difficulties, or the feeling of inadequacy. His life speaks with gentle clarity. Fidelity, humility, and perseverance are the true pathways to a vocation, priestly or otherwise. Ordination and assignment to the parish of Ars. The path to priesthood for St. John Vianney was far from easy. Overcoming great personal challenges and academic obstacles, young Jean-Marie Vianney clung to his vocation with simplicity, perseverance, and trust in God's providence. After years of humble study, often interrupted by the upheaval of Napoleon's wars, he was finally ordained a priest in 1815 at the age of 29. But it was his first assignment to the small and forgotten village of Ars that would shape not just his ministry, but the spiritual life of the whole Church. Ars was little more than a dot on the map, a rural outpost with only a few hundred souls, suffering from indifference, poverty, and a profound forgetfulness of God. Many villagers had grown lax in the faith, rarely attending Mass or receiving the sacraments. By worldly standards, it was an assignment that might have discouraged any newly ordained priest. Yet, in the eyes of the Church, and by the mysterious workings of divine grace, Ars became a stage for the extraordinary. Father Vianney arrived quietly, on foot, carrying little more than his breviary and a heart filled with zeal for souls. What he found was a spiritual desert, and what he brought was a quiet, unwavering love for the Eucharist, regular devotion, and a commitment to the duties of a parish priest. Day by day, through faithful presence, tireless prayer, and humble acts of penance, St. John Vianney began the work of re-evangelization. He visited the sick, consoled the poor, and restored reverence to the sacraments. His example, more than any words, rekindled faith in ours and slowly drew parishioners back to Christ. It was the beginning of something miraculous, a gentle revolution of grace centered around the altar and the confessional that would soon radiate far beyond the borders of a simple rural parish, the transformation of ours through holiness and prayer. When St. John Vianney first arrived in the tiny village of Ars, France, in 1818, few could have predicted the radical change that would soon unfold. At the time, Ars was spiritually impoverished. The faith that had once flourished there was overshadowed by indifference, sparse mass attendance, and a culture increasingly influenced by the secularism of post-revolutionary France. But the new parish priest did not let discouragement take root. John Vianney relied on the two great weapons of every saint, holiness and prayer. He began simply, spending hours in prayer before the Blessed Sacrament each day, and offering his daily sacrifices for the conversion of his flock. He made the church the beating heart of village life, not with programs or fanfare, but by being present, celebrating the sacraments, visiting the sick and poor, and offering gentle encouragement paired with uncompromising fidelity to the teachings of the Church. He was relentless in calling the people of Ars back to the Eucharist, urging them, "If we really understood the Mass, we would die of joy." St. John Vianney's holiness became a beacon that drew even the most hardened hearts. His penitential life and burning charity bore fruit. Where once the church was empty, people slowly began to return. They saw in their priest a living example of Christ, someone whose love and personal sacrifice had the power to awaken hope. Confession became the foundation of this parish revival. The curé of Ars would spend up to 16 hours a day in the confessional, transforming souls through the grace of reconciliation. Word spread, and pilgrims flocked from across France, seeking not only the forgiveness of sins, but the presence of a true spiritual father. Through patience, prayer, and a spirit of sacrifice, St. John Vianney proved that even the most unremarkable village could be renewed. One soul at a time, through the grace of God, the curé of Ars and his love for the Eucharist. In the humble rural village of Ars, St. John Vianney became known not just as a pastoral presence. He was often referred to as the curé of Ars, but as a living embodiment of Eucharistic love. Everything about Father Vianney's ministry pointed to the altar. His day began before dawn, with hours spent in prayer before the tabernacle. Parishioners and pilgrims alike were moved by the sight of their shepherd, kneeling silently in adoration. His gaze fixed on the Blessed Sacrament, as if conversing heart to heart with the Lord himself. For St. John Vianney, the Holy Eucharist was not merely a symbol, but the very heart of Christian life, he would say. There is nothing so great as the Eucharist. If God had something more precious, he would have given it to us. His reverence at the altar was infectious. The tiny church of Ars soon overflowed with the faithful, drawn by the magnetic presence of a priest utterly convinced of Christ's real presence. Curé's homilies brimmed with tenderness and awe. "We are not worthy to receive our Lord," he would tell his flock, "but we need him so much." His guidance spurred a renewal of devotion. Daily Mass, regular confession, and Eucharistic adoration became the very rhythm of life in Ars. Vianney spent long hours in the confessional, preparing souls to receive Jesus worthily. Emphasizing mercy and the transforming power of grace, he lived out what he preached, a priest whose love for the Eucharist overflowed into concrete acts of charity, penance, and spiritual fatherhood. St. John Vianney's witness reminds us that even amidst the busyness of parish life and the burdens of daily struggles, the Eucharist remains the wellspring of hope and strength. Through his example, we are encouraged to deepen our own reverence for the Blessed Sacrament, letting it transform our hearts and anchor our daily journey with Christ. St. John Vianney's tireless ministry in the confessional. It is difficult, perhaps even impossible, to speak about St. John Vianney without contemplating the sacred space where he poured out his life. The confessional for this humble parish priest, the darkened wood of the confessional, was not merely a booth, but a battlefield and a refuge. Day after day, St. John Vianney became the very image of Christ, the Good Shepherd, sacrificing sleep, meals, and personal comfort for the spiritual healing of his flock. People flocked from distant towns and even other countries to ours, not for grand liturgies or dramatic sermons, but to encounter a priest whose holiness radiated even in whispered absolutions. By dawn, lines stretched around the tiny church. Sometimes, John Vianney would sit in the confessional up to 16 hours a day. Pausing only briefly, it was not unusual for the townspeople to find him on his knees in prayer long before sunrise, preparing his heart to guide penitents into the embrace of God's mercy. His spiritual gifts were apparent. Many penitents later recounted how he would gently tell them their sins before they spoke, or offer insights that could only have come by divine grace. Yet, at the confessional's heart was always his humility and affection for souls, reminding each person of their dignity as a beloved child of God. He never tired of dispensing the Father's forgiveness, no matter how many times penitents returned. As St. John Vianney once said, "The Lord is more eager to forgive us than a mother is to rescue her child from a fire." In the simple wooden confessional of ours, grace flowed like a living stream here. St. John Vianney invited sinners home, showing through his example that, for every Christian, the sacrament of penance is not a duty, but a profound encounter with the healing love of Jesus. His fidelity and zeal continue to inspire priests and laity alike to rediscover the mercy waiting for them in the confessional, no matter how long they have been away. Miracles attributed to the Curé of Ars. When we speak of St. John Vianney, affectionately known as the Cure of Ars, we enter a world where the supernatural brushstrokes of God's grace are visible in daily life. In the small rural parish of Ars, miracles punctuated his ministry, now inseparable from his legacy as patron of parish priests. Healing the body and soul from all corners of France, pilgrims flocked to Ars, drawn by reports of physical healings and spiritual liberation. Many arrived frail and sick, some suffering for years from illnesses that baffled the best doctors of the time. Through simple blessings, fervent prayers, and the sign of the cross, souls experienced unexplainable recoveries. The testimonies echo a profound truth of the Catholic faith. Our Lord delights in working through the humble, especially for the good of his people. Reading hearts in the confessional, perhaps the most striking miracles were invisible. St. John Vianney possessed an extraordinary gift for reading souls, a charism granted by God to help sinners return to grace. Penitents would enter the confessional bearing burdens of sin, sometimes even hiding parts of their past, out of shame or forgetfulness. The curé would gently name forgotten sins or reveal hidden wounds, not to embarrass but to invite healing and conversion. Many left the confessional in tears, amazed by God's personal love and the saint's supernatural insight. Multiplication of food and bread during times of famine or poverty in Ars, St. John Vianney entrusted the parish's needs to divine providence. Several witnesses recounted occasions when the meager store of flour or bread would miraculously suffice for far more than what seemed possible. Reminiscent of the loaves and fishes in the Gospel, his charity and unwavering faith opened the door for God's abundance to overflow, nurturing both body and spirit. Deliverance from evil. The curé's spiritual battles with the devil were well known throughout France. He endured physical attacks and constant disturbances at night, which he accepted as part of his mission for souls. Many disturbed or oppressed individuals sought him out, and through his prayers and intercessions, experienced liberation from spiritual torments. These dramatic encounters inspired hope and courage among the faithful, showing the power of Christ victorious through his saints. St. John Vianney's miracles flowed not from personal power, but from a radical surrender to Christ and ardent love for souls. Each miracle was a signpost pointing to the deep reality of God's mercy, inviting every heart, then and now, to trust more deeply in his loving care. Spiritual warfare and his battles with the devil. Behind the humble facade of St. John Vianney's daily priestly life lay an extraordinary unseen battleground. While the villagers of Ars saw his gentle smile, late-night confessions, and tireless hours before the tabernacle, the curé himself struggled nightly against a far more sinister adversary, the devil. The reality of spiritual warfare was no mere abstraction for him. It was woven into the very fabric of his vocation. The attacks often came as St. John Vianney tried to rest. He recounted how, night after night, he would be assailed by mysterious noises, banging on the walls, furniture shaking, even his bed being violently tossed about the room. These disturbances were so frequent that he came to refer to the devil with an almost disarming simplicity as le grappin, a rural French word for a grappling hook. Far from paralyzing him with fear, these tormenting episodes steeled his resolve. He would quip to visitors, "The grappin and I, we are almost comrades." What was at stake in these spiritual battles? St. John Vianney understood the devil's fury was not so much for who he was, but for what was happening in Ars. Souls were returning to the sacraments. Hardened sinners were reconciled to God after decades away. Night after night, the sacramental power poured forth from his little church was a loss for hell, so the enemy retaliated. "The devil is not afraid of me," the saint once confessed. "It is because of the confessions that he wages war on me." St. John Vianney's response to these attacks was not bravado but deeper humility and reliance on God. He would increase his penances, spend more hours in prayer, and call upon Our Lady and St. Michael for help. These trials taught him, and teach us, that the spiritual life is not without struggle, but that fidelity to Jesus Christ always gains the victory.
It's your journey, but we won't make the trip alone.